Welcome to a complete reading of Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. Let's begin. For mercy has a human heart, pity a human face, and love the human form divine, and peace the human dress. Cruelty has a human heart, and jealousy a human face, terror the human form divine, and secrecy the human dress. The human dress is forged iron, the human form a fiery forge, the human face a furnace sealed, the human heart its hungry gorge. William Blake, Songs of Experience. Chapter 1. Will Graham set Crawford down at a picnic table between the house and the ocean and gave him a glass of iced tea. Jack Crawford looked at the pleasant old house, salt-silvered wood in the clear light. "I should have caught you in Marathon when you got off work," he said. "You don't want to talk about it here." "I don't want to talk about it anywhere, Jack. You've got to talk about it, so let's have it. Just don't get out any pictures. If you brought pictures, leave them in the briefcase. Molly and Willie will be back soon." "How much do you know?" "What was in the Miami Herald and the Times," Graham said. "Two families killed in their houses a month apart, Birmingham and Atlanta. The circumstances were similar." "Not similar, the same." "How many confessed so far?" 86 when I called this afternoon," Crawford said. "Cranks. None of them knew the details. He smashed the mirrors and used the pieces. None of them knew that." "What else did you keep out of the papers?" "He's blonde, right-handed, and really strong. Wears a size 11 shoe. He can tie a bowline. The prints are all smooth gloves." "You said that in public?" "He's not too comfortable with locks," Crawford said. "He used a glass cutter and a suction cup to get in the house last time. Oh, and his blood's AB positive." "Somebody hurt him?" "Not that we know of. We typed him from semen and saliva. He's a secretor." Crawford looked out at the flat sea. "Will, I want to ask you something. You saw this in the papers. The second one was all over the TV. Did you ever think about giving me a call?" "No." "Why not?" "There weren't many details at first on the one in Birmingham. It could have been anything. Revenge, relative. But after a second one, you knew what it was." "Yeah, a psychopath. I didn't call you because I didn't want to. I know who you have already to work on this. You've got the best lab. You'd have Heimlich at Harvard, Blum at University of Chicago, and I've got you down here fixing fucking boat motors." "I don't think I'd be all that useful to you, Jack. I never really think about it anymore." "Really? You caught two. The last two we had, you caught." "How? By doing the same things you and the rest of them are doing." "That's not entirely true, Will. It's the way you think. I think there's been a lot of bullshit about the way I think. I made some jumps you never explained." "The evidence was there," Graham said. Sure there was. Plenty of it. Afterward. Before the caller, there was so damn little we couldn't get probable cause to go in." "You have the people you need, Jack. I don't think I'd be an improvement. I came down here to get away from that." "I know it. You got hurt last time. Now you look alright." "I'm alright. It's not getting cut. You've been cut." "I've been cut, but not like that." "It's not getting cut. I just decided to stop. I don't think I can explain it." "If you couldn't look at it anymore, God knows I'd understand that." "No. You know, having to look, it's always bad, but you get so you can function anyway, as long as they're dead. The hospital interviews, that's worse. You have to shake it off and keep on thinking. I don't believe I could do it now. I could make myself look, but I'd shut down at the thinking." "These are all dead, Will," Crawford said as kindly as he could. Jack Crawford heard the rhythm and syntax of his own speech in Graham's voice. He had heard Graham do that before, with other people. Often in tense conversation, Graham took on the other person's speech patterns. At first, Crawford had thought he was doing it deliberately, that it was a gimmick to get the back and forth rhythm going. Later, Crawford realized that Graham did it involuntarily, and sometimes he tried to stop it and couldn't. Crawford dipped into his jacket pocket with 2 fingers. He flipped 2 photographs across the table face up. "All dead," he said. Graham stared at him a moment before picking up the pictures. They were only snapshots. A woman, followed by 3 children and a duck. carried picnic items up the bank of a pond. A family stood behind a cake. After half a minute, he put the photographs down again. He pushed them into a stack with his fingers and looked far down the beach where the boy hunkered, examining something in the sand. A woman stood watching, hand on her hip, spent waves creaming around her ankles. She leaned inland to swing her wet hair off her shoulders. Graham, ignoring his guest, watched Molly and the boy for as long as he could look at the pictures. Crawford was pleased. He kept the satisfaction out of his face with the same care he had used to choose the site of this conversation. He thought he had Graham. Let it cook. 3 remarkably ugly dogs wandered up and flopped to the ground around the table. "My God," Crawford said. "These are probably dogs," Graham explained. "People dump small ones here all the time. I can give away the little ones. The rest stay around and get to be the big ones. They're fat enough. Molly's a sucker for strays. You got a nice life here, Will. Molly and the boy, how old is he?" 11. "Good-looking kid. He's going to be taller than you." Graham nodded. "His father was. I'm lucky here. I know that. I want to bring Phyllis down here, Florida, get a place where I retire and stop living like a cave fish. She says all her friends are in Arlington. I meant to thank her for the book she brought me in the hospital, but I never did. Please tell her for me." "I'll tell her." 2 small, bright birds lit on the table, hoping to find jelly. Crawford watched them hop around until they flew away. "Well, this freak seems to be in a phase with the moon. He killed the Jacobus in Birmingham on Saturday night, June 28th, full moon. He killed the Leeds family at Atlanta night last July 26. That's 1 day short of a lunar month. So if we're lucky, we may have a little over 3 weeks before he does it again. I don't think you want to wait here in the Keys and read about the next one in your Miami Herald. Hell, I'm not the Pope. I'm not saying what you ought to do, but I want to ask you, do you respect my judgment, Will?" "Yeah." "I think we have a better chance to get him fast if you help. Hell, Will, saddle up and help us. Go to Atlanta and Birmingham and look, then come up in Washington, just TDY. Graham did not reply. Crawford waited while 5 waves slapped at the beach. Then he got up and slung his suit coat over his shoulder. "Let's talk after dinner. Stay and eat." Crawford shook his head. "I'll come back later. There'll be messages at the Holiday Inn. I'll be a while on the phone. Tell Molly thanks, though." Crawford's rental car raised thin dust that settled on the bushes beside the shell road. Graham returned to the table. He was afraid that this was how he would remember the end of Sugarloaf Key. Ice melting in 2 tea glasses and paper napkins fluttering off the redwood table in the breeze, and Molly and Willie far down on the beach. Sunset on Sugarloaf, the herons still and the red sun swelling. Will Graham and Molly Foster Graham sat on a beach drift log, their faces orange in the sunset, backs in violet shadow. She picked up his hand. "Crawford stopped by to see me at the shop before he came here," she said. "He asked directions to the house. I tried to call you. You really ought to answer the phone once in a while. We saw the car when we got home, went around on the beach. What'd he ask you?" "How you are." "And you said?" "I said you're fine. He should leave you the hell alone. What does he want you to do?" "Look at evidence. I'm a forensic specialist, Molly. You've seen my diploma." "You mended a crack in the ceiling paper with your diploma. I saw that." She straddled the log to face him. "If you missed your other life, what you used to do, I think you'd talk about it. You never do. You're open and calm and easy now. I love that. We have a good time, don't we?" Her single, styptic blink told him he'd have said something better. Before he could fix it, she went on. "What you did for Crawford was bad for you. He has a lot of other people, the whole damn government, I guess. Why can't he leave us alone?" "Didn't Crawford tell you that? He was my supervisor the 2 times I left the FBI Academy to look back at the field. Those 2 cases were the only ones like this he'd ever had, and Jack's been working a long time. Now he's got a new one. This kind of psychopath is very rare. He knows I've had experience." "Yes, you had," Molly said. His shirt was unbuttoned and she could see the looping scar across his stomach. It was finger width and raised, and it never tanned. It ran down from his left hip bone and turned up to notch his rib cage on the other side. Dr. Hannibal Lecter did that with a linoleum knife. It happened a year before Molly met Graham, and it very nearly killed him. Dr. Lecter, known in the tabloids as Hannibal the Cannibal, was the second psychopath Graham had caught. When he finally got out of the hospital, Graham resigned from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, left Washington, and found a job as a diesel mechanic in the boatyard at Marathon in the Florida Keys. It was a trade he grew up with. He slept in a trailer at the boatyard until Molly and her good ramshackle house on Sugarloaf Key. Now he straddled the drift log and held both her hands. Her feet burrowed under his. "All right, Molly, Crawford thinks I have a knack for the monsters. It's like a superstition with him. Do you believe it?" Graham watched 3 pelicans fly in line across the tidal flats. "Molly, an intelligent psychopath, particularly a sadist, is hard to catch for several reasons. First, there's no traceable motive, so you can't go that way, and most of the time you won't have any help from informants. See, there's a lot more stooling than sleuthing behind more arrests, but in a case like this there won't be any informants. He may not even know what he's doing, so you have to take whatever evidence you have and extrapolate. You try to reconstruct his thinking, you try to find patterns, and you follow him and find him," Molly said. "I'm afraid if you go after this maniac or whatever he is, I'm afraid he'll do you like the last one did. That's it. That's what scares me." "He'll never see me and know my name, Molly. The police, they'll have to take him down if they can find him, not me. Crawford just wants another point of view." She watched the red sun spread over the sea. High cirrus glowed above it. Graham loved the way she turned her head, heartlessly giving him her less perfect profile. He could see the pulse in her throat and remembered suddenly and completely the taste of salt on her skin. He swallowed and said, "What the hell can I do?" "Well, you've already decided. If you stay here and there's more killing, maybe it would sour this place for you. High noon and all that crap. If it's that way, you weren't really asking." "If I were asking, what would you say?" "Stay here with me. Me, and Willie. Drag him in if he won't do any good. I'm supposed to dry my eyes and wave my hanky. If things don't go so well, I'll have the satisfaction that we did the right thing. But it'll last as long as the taps. Then I can go home and switch one side of the blanket on. I'd be back at the back of the pack. Never in your life. I'm selfish, huh? I don't care. Neither do I. It's keen and sweet here. All the things that happened to you before make you know it. Value it, I mean." He nodded. "Don't want to lose it either way," she said. "No, we won't either." Darkness fell quickly, and Jupiter appeared, low in the southwest. They walked back to the house beside the rising gibbous moon. Far out past the tidal flats, bait fish leaped for their lives. Crawford came back after dinner. He had taken off his coat and tie and rolled up his sleeves for the casual effect. Molly thought Crawford's thick, pale forearms were repulsive. To her, he looked like a damnably wise ape. She served him coffee under the porch fan and sat with him while Graham and Willie went out to feed the dogs. She said nothing. Moths batted softly at the screens. "It looks good, Molly," Crawford said. "You both do. Skinny and brown." "Whatever I say, you'll take him anyway, won't you?" "Yeah, I have to. I have to do it. But I swear to God, Molly, I'll make it easy on him as I can. He's changed. It's great you got married. He's better and better. He doesn't dream so often now. He was really obsessed with the dogs for a while. Now he just takes care of them. He doesn't talk about them all the time. Here's friend Jack. Why can't you leave him alone?" "Because it's his bad luck to be the best. Because he doesn't think like other people. Somehow, he never got in a rut." "He thinks you want him to look at evidence." "I do want him to look at evidence. There's nobody better with evidence. But he has the other thing too. Imagination, projection, whatever. He doesn't like that part of it." "You wouldn't like it either if you had it. Promise me something, Jack. Promise me if you see he doesn't get too close. I think it would kill him to have to fight. You won't have to fight, I can promise you that. When Graham finished with the dogs, Molly helped him pack. Chapter 2. Will Graham drove slowly past the house where the Charles Leeds family had lived and died. The windows were dark, 1 yard light burned. He parked 2 blocks away and walked back through the warm night, carrying the Atlanta police detective's report in a cardboard box. Graham had insisted on coming alone. Anyone else in the house would distract him. That was the reason he gave Crawford. He had another private reason. He was not sure how he'd act. He didn't want a face aimed at him all the time. He had been all right at the morgue. The 2-story brick home was set back from the street in a wooded lot. Graham stood under the trees for a long time looking at it. He tried to be still inside. In his mind, a silver pendulum swung in the darkness. He waited until the pendulum was still. A few neighbors drove by, looking at the house quickly and looking away. A murder house is ugly to the neighbors, like the face of someone who betrayed them. Only outsiders and children stare. The shades were up. Graham was glad. That meant no relatives have been inside. Relatives always lower the shades. He walked around the side of the house, moving carefully, not using his flashlight. He stopped twice to listen. The Atlanta police knew he was there, but the neighbors did not. They would be jumpy. They might shoot. Looking in the rear window, he could see all the way through to the light in the front yard, past silhouettes of furniture. The scent of Cape jasmine was heavy on the air. A latticed porch ran across most of the back. On the porch door was a seal of the Atlanta Police Department. Graham removed the seal and went in. The door from the porch in the kitchen was patched with plywood, where the police had taken out the glass. By flashlight, he unlocked it with the key the police had given him. He wanted to turn on the lights. He wanted to put on his shiny badge and make some official noises to justify himself to the silent house where 5 people had died. He did none of that. He went to the dark kitchen and sat down at the breakfast table. 2 pilot lights on the kitchen range glowed blue in the dark. He smelled furniture polish and apples. The thermostat clicked and the air conditioning came on. Graham started at the noise, felt a trickle of fear. He was an old hand at fear. He could manage this one. He simply was afraid, and he could go on anyway. He could see and hear better, afraid. He could not speak as concisely, and fear sometimes made him rude. Here, there was nobody left to speak to. There was nobody to offend anymore. Madness came into his house through the door into this kitchen, moving on size 11 feet. Sitting in the dark, he sensed madness like a bloodhound sniffs a shirt. Graham had studied the detective's report at Atlanta homicide for most of the day and early evening. He remembered that the light on the vent hood over the stove had been on when the police arrived. He turned it on now. 2 framed samplers hung on the wall beside the stove. One said, "Kissin' don't last, cookin' do." The other was, "It's always to the kitchen that our friends best like to come, to hear the heartbeat of the house, take comfort in its hum." Graham looked at his watch. 11:30 p.m. According to the pathologist, the deaths occurred between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. First, there was the entry. He thought about that. The madman slipped the hook on the outside screen door, stood in the darkness of the porch, and took something from his pocket. A suction cup, maybe the base of a pencil sharpener designed to stick to a desktop. Crouched against the wooden lower half of the kitchen door, the madman raised his head to peer through the glass. He put out his tongue and licked the cup, pressed it to the glass, and flicked the lever to make it stick. A small glass cutter was attached to the cup with a string so that he could cut a circle. Tiny squeal of the glass cutter, and 1 solid tap to break the glass. 1 hand to tap, 1 hand to hold the suction cup. The glass must not fall. The loose piece of glass is slightly egg-shaped because the string wrapped around the shaft of the suction cup as he cut. A little grating noise as he pulls off the piece of glass back outside. He does not care that he leaves AB saliva on the glass. His hand in the tight glove sneaks through the hole. Finds the lock. The door opens silently. He's inside. In the light of the vent hood, he can see his body in the strange kitchen. It's pleasantly cool in the house. Will Graham ate 2 DI gels. The crackle of the cellophane irritated him as he stuffed it in his pocket. He walked through the living room holding his flashlight, well away from him by habit. Though he had studied the floor plan, he made one wrong turn before he found the stairs. They did not creak. Now he stood in the doorway of the master bedroom. He could see faintly without the flashlight. A digital clock on a nightstand projected the time on the ceiling, and an orange nightlight burned above the baseboard by the bathroom. The coppery smell of blood was strong. Eyes accustomed to the dark could see well enough. The madman could distinguish Mr. Leeds from his wife. There was enough light for him to cross the room, grab Leeds' hair, and cut his throat. What then? Back to the wall switch. A greeting to Mrs. Leeds, then the gunshot that disabled her. Graham switched on the lights and bloodstains shouted at him from the walls, from the mattress and the floor. The very air had screams smeared on it, a flinch from the noise in a silent room full of dark stains drying. Graham sat on the floor until his head was quiet. Still, still, be still. The number and variety of bloodstains had puzzled Atlanta detectives trying to reconstruct the crime. All the victims were found slain in their beds. This was not consistent with the locations of the stains. At first they'd believed Charles Leeds was attacked in his daughter's room and his body dragged to the master bedroom. Cook's examination of the splash patterns made them reconsider. The killer's exact movements in the rooms were not yet determined. Now, with the advantage of the autopsy and lab reports, Will Graham began to see how it happened. The intruder cut Charles Leeds' throat as he lay asleep beside his wife, went back to the wall switch and turned on the light. Hairs and oil from Mr. Leeds' head were left on the switch plate by a smooth glove. He shot Mrs. Leeds as she was rising, then went towards the children's rooms. Leeds rose with his cut throat and tried to protect the children, losing great gouts of blood and an unmistakable arterial spray as he tried to fight. He was shoved away, fell, and died with his daughter in her room. One of the 2 boys was shot in bed. The other boy was also found in bed, but he had dust balls in his hair. Police believed he was dragged out from under his bed to be shot. Then all of them were dead, except possibly Mrs. Leeds. The smashing of mirrors began, the selection of shards, the furniture and future attention to Mrs. Leeds. Graham had full copies of all the autopsy protocols in his box. Here was the one on Mrs. Leeds. The bullet entered to the right of her navel and lodged in her lumbar spine, but she died of strangulation. The increase in serotonin and free histamine levels in the gunshot wound indicated she had lived at least 5 minutes after she was shot. The histamine was much higher than the serotonin, so she had not lived more than 15 minutes. Most of her other injuries were probably, but not conclusively, post-mortem. If the other injuries were post-mortem, what was the killer doing in the interval while Mrs. Leeds waited to die? Graham wondered. Struggling with Leeds and killing the others, yes, but that would have taken less than a minute. Smashing the mirrors, but what else? The Atlanta detectives were thorough. They had measured and photographed exhaustively and had vacuumed and grid searched and taken the traps from the drains. Still, Graham looked for himself. From the police photographs and taped outlines on the mattresses, Graham could see where the bodies had been found. The evidence, nitrate traces on bedclothes and a case of gunshot wounds, indicated that they were found in positions approximating those in which they died. But the profusion of bloodstains and matted sliding marks on the hall carpet remained unexplained. One detective had theorized that some of the victims tried to crawl away from the killer. Graham did not believe it. Clearly, the killer moved them after they were dead and put them back the way they were when he killed them. What he did with Mrs. Leeds was obvious, but what about the others? Had he not disfigured them further as he did Mrs. Leeds? The children each suffered a single gunshot wound to the head. Charles Leeds bled to death, with aspirated blood contributing. The only additional mark on him was a superficial ligature mark around his chest, believed to be post-mortem. What did the killer do with them after they were dead? From his box, Graham took the police photographs, lab reports, and the individual blood and organ stains in the rooms, and standard comparison plates of blood drop trajectories. He went over the upstairs room minutely, trying to match injuries to stains, trying to work backwards. He plotched each splash on a measured field sketch in the master bedroom, using the standard comparison plates to estimate the direction and velocity of the bloodfall. In this way, he hoped to learn the positions of the bodies were in at different times. Here was a row of 3 bloodstains slanting up and around a corner of the bedroom wall. Here were 3 faint bloodstains on the carpet beneath them. The wall above the headboard on the Charles Leeds side of the bed was blood-stained, and there were swipes along the baseboards. Graham's field sketch began to look like a join-in-the-dots puzzle with no numbers. He stared at it, looked up at the room, and back to the sketch until his head ached. He went to the bathroom and took his last tube Bufferin, scooping up water in his hand from the faucet in the sink. He splashed water in his face and dried it with his shirt tail. Water spilled on the floor. He had forgotten that the trap was gone from the drain. Otherwise, the bathroom was undisturbed, except for the broken mirror and traces of red fingerprint powder called dragon's blood. Toothbrushes, facial cream, razor were all in place. The bathroom looked as though the family had still used it. Mrs. Leeds' pantyhose hung on the towel racks where she had left them to dry. He saw that she cut the leg off a pair when it had a runner so she could match 2 one-legged pairs, wear them at the same time, and save money. Mrs. Leeds' small, homey economy pierced him. Molly did the same thing. Graham climbed out a window onto a porch roof and sat on the gritty shingles. He hugged his knees, his damp shirt pressed cold across his back, and snorted the smell of slaughter out of his nose. The lights of Atlanta rusted the night sky, and the stars were hard to see. The night would be clear in the Keys. He could be watching shooting stars with Molly and Willie, listening for the whoosh they solemnly agreed a shooting star must make. The Delta Aquarid meteor shower was at its maximum, and Willie was up for it. He shivered and snorted again. He did not want to think of Molly now. To do so was tasteless as well as distracting. Graham had a lot of trouble with taste. Often his thoughts were not tasty. There were no effective partitions in his mind. What he saw and learned touched everything else he knew. Some of the combinations were hard to live with, but he could not anticipate them, could not block and repress. His learned values of decency and propriety tagged along, shocked at his associations, appalled at his dreams, sorry that in the bone arena of his skull were there no forts for what he loved. His associations came at the speed of light. His valued judgments were at the pace of a responsive reading. They could never keep up and direct his thinking. He viewed his own mentality as grotesque but useful, like a chair made out of antlers. There was nothing you could do about it. Graham turned off the lights at the Leeds house and went out through the kitchen. At the far end of the back porch, his flashlight revealed a bicycle and a wicker dog bed. There was a doghouse in the backyard, a dog bowl by the steps. The evidence indicated the Leeds were surprised in their sleep. Holding the flashlight between his chin and chest, he wrote the memo. Jack, where was the dog? Graham drove back to his hotel. He had to concentrate on his driving. Though there was little traffic at 4:30 a.m., his head still ached, and he watched for all-night pharmacy. He found one in Peachtree. A slovenly rent-a-cop dozed near the door. A pharmacist in a dingy jacket, enough to highlight his dandruff, sold Graham Bufferin. The glare at the place was painful. Graham disliked young pharmacists. They had a middle-of-the-litter look about them. They were often smug, and he suspected that they were unpleasant at home. "What else?" the pharmacist said, his fingers poised above the cash register keys. "What else?" The Atlanta FBI office had booked him in an absurd hotel near the city's new Peachtree Center. They had glass elevators shaped like milkweed pods to let him know he was really in town now. Graham rode up to his room with 2 conventioneers, wearing name tags and the printed greeting, "Hi." They held to the rail and looked over the lobby as they ascended. "Look yonder by the desk. That's Wilma and them now just coming in," the large one said. "God damn, I'd love to tear off a piece of that." "Fuck it till her nose bleeds," the other one said. Fear and rut and anger at the fear. "So you know why a woman has legs? Why? So she won't leave a trail like a snail." The elevator doors opened. "This is it, is it?" the large one said. He lurched against the facing as he got off. "This is the blind leading the blind," the other one said. Graham put his cardboard box on the dresser in his room. Then he put it in a drawer where he could not see it. He had enough of the wide-eyed dead. He wanted to call Molly, but it was still too early. A meeting was scheduled for 8 a.m. at the Atlanta Police Headquarters. He had little enough to tell them. He would try to sleep. His mind was busy rooming house with arguments all around him. They were fighting somewhere down the hall. He was numb and empty, and he drank 2 fingers of whiskey from his bathroom glass before he laid down. The darkness pressed too closely on him. He turned on the bathroom light and went back to sleep. He pretended Molly was in the bathroom brushing her hair. Lines from the autopsy protocol sounded in his own voice, though he had never read them aloud. The feces was formed. A trace of talcum on the lower right leg, fracture of the medial orbit wall owing to insertion of mirror shard. Graham tried to think about the beach at Sugarloaf Key. He tried to hear the waves. He pictured his workbench, and his mind thought about the escapement for the water clock he and Willie were building. He sang Whiskey River under his breath and tried to run Black Mountain Rag through his head from one end to the other. Molly's music. Doc Watson's guitar part was all right, but he always lost in a fiddle break. Molly had tried to teach him clog dancing in the backyard, and she was bouncing. He finally dozed. He woke in an hour, rigid and sweating, seeing the other pillow silhouetted against the bathroom light, and it was Mrs. Leeds lying beside him, bitten and torn, mirrored eyes and blood like the legs of spectacles over her temples and ears. He could not turn his head to face her. Brain screaming like a smoke alarm, he put his hand over there and touched the dry cloth. Having acted, he felt some immediate relief. He rose, his heart pounding, and put on a dry t-shirt. He threw the wet one in the bathtub. He could not move over to the dry side of the bed. Instead, he put a towel on the side where he had sweated and laid down on it, propped against the headboard with a stiff drink in his hand. He swallowed a third of it. He reached for something to think about, anything. The pharmacy where he bought the Bufferin. Then, perhaps because it was his only experience all day that was not related to death. He could remember old drugstores with soda fountains. As a boy, he thought old drugstores had a slightly furtive air. When he went in, he always thought about buying rubbers where he needed any or not. There were things on the shelves you shouldn't look at too long. In the pharmacy where he bought the Bufferin, the contraceptives were in their illustrated wrappings or in a lucite case on the wall behind the cash register, framed like art. He preferred the drugstore and sundry of his childhood. Graham was nearly 40 and just beginning to feel the tug of the way the world was then. It was a sea anchor steamed behind him in heavy weather. He thought about Smoot. Old Smoot had been the soda jerkin manager for the pharmacist to own the local drugstore when Graham was a child. Smoot, who drank on the job, forgot to unroll the awning, and sneakers melted in the window. Smoot forgot to unplug the coffee pot, and the fire department was summoned. Smoot sold ice cream cones to children on credit. His principal outrage was ordering 50 Kewpie dolls from the detail man while the store owner was on vacation. On his return, the owner fired Smoot for a week. Then he held a Kewpie doll sale. 50 of the Kewpie dolls were arranged in a semicircle in the front window so that they all stared at whomever was looking in. They had wide eyes of cornflower blue. It was a striking display, and Graham looked at it for some time. He knew they were only Kewpie dolls, but he could feel the focus of their attention, so many of them looking. A number of people stopped to look at them. Plaster dolls, all with the same silly spit curl, yet their concentrated gaze made this face tingle. Graham began to relax a little on the bed, Kewpie dolls staring. He started to take a drink, gasped, and choked it in his chest. He fumbled for the bedside lamp and fetched his box for the dresser drawer. He took out the autopsy protocols of the 3 Leeds children and his measured field sketches of the master bedroom and spread them on the bed. Here were the 3 bloodstains slanting up the corner, and here were the matching stains on the carpet. Here were the dimensions of the 3 children. Brother, sister, big brother, match, match, match. They had been in a row, seated along the wall facing the bed, an audience, a dead audience, and Leeds, tied around the chest of the headboard, composed to look as though he were sitting up in bed, getting the ligature mark, staining the wall above the headboard. What were they watching? Nothing. They were all dead, but their eyes were open. They were watching a performance starring the madman and the body of Mrs. Leeds, beside Mr. Leeds on the bed. An audience. The crazy could look around in their faces. Graham wondered if he lit a candle. The flickering light would simulate expressions on their faces. No candle was found. Maybe we would think to do that next time. This first small bond to the killer itched and strung him like a leech. Graham bit the sheet, thinking, why did you move them again? Why didn't you leave them that way? Graham asked, there's something you don't want me to know about you. Either something you're ashamed of, or is it something you can't afford for me to know? Did you open their eyes? Mrs. Leeds was lovely, wasn't she? You turned on the light after you cut his throat so Mrs. Leeds could watch him flop, didn't you? It was maddening to have to wear gloves when you touched her, wasn't it? There was talcum on her leg. There was no talcum in the bathroom. Someone else seemed to speak those two facts in a flat voice. You took off her gloves, didn't you? The powder came off a rubber glove as you pulled it off to touch her. You did it, you son of a bitch. You touched her with your bare hands. Then you put on the gloves back on and you wiped her down. But while the gloves were off, did you open their eyes? Jack Crawford answered his telephone on the 5th ring. He had answered the telephone the night many times, and he was not confused. Jack, this is Will. Yes, Will. Is Price still in latent prints? Yeah, he doesn't go out much anymore. He's working on a single print index. I think he ought to come to Atlanta. Why, you said yourself the guy down here is good. He is good, but not as good as Price. What do you want him to do? Where would he look? Mrs. Leeds' fingernails and toenails. They're painted. It's a slick surface. The corneas of all their eyes. I think you took his gloves off, Jack. Jesus, Price will have to gun it, Crawford said. The funeral's this afternoon. Thank you. That was part 1 of Red Dragon. Thank you for listening, and good night.